What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Point2Point NHL Recap show. I'm Pascal Breyer, joined by Mark Howlak. Unfortunately, no Raina this week. We just with our schedules, we couldn't really find any time to all three of us get together to record. So it's just me and you, Mark, this episode. Even just us two, we had some struggles finding a time to record. But just to start off, how are you doing, man?
Pretty good, buddy. It's definitely been difficult to kind of coordinate a time with our different work schedules. Pretty busy myself, just kind of getting ready to actually move in the next couple weeks and going on vacation in a couple days. So kind of hectic on my side, but trying to just keep up with like the NHL coming back this week after the All-Star break. How about you, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, there's a lot of news this week, which is nice because last week with the All-Star break wasn't too much news, but a lot sort of came out right after the All-Star break, right before as well. Some trades we haven't talked about yet, a bit of firings. Big news though to start off. Let's get right into it with the Arizona Coyotes. They're potentially on the move. There's several NHL insiders that have reported over the last few days that the NHL is not happy with the Coyotes ownership and their sort of inability to find a new arena for the team. And the Utah Jazz owner, NBA Utah Jazz, Ryan Smith, he's a pretty young, hip guy. He's put forth a proposal to the NHL over the last week or so, basically asking to initiate the expansion process and bring a team to Salt Lake City. So he's very interested right now in getting a team into Salt Lake City. And then this isn't fully confirmed, but there have been rumors that he's offered a large sum of money to buy the Coyotes. So that could be on the books too, that he buys the Coyotes and just relocates them to the Utah Jazz. What do you make of the whole Arizona situation right now, though, Mark?
I think it's like I kind of understand the NHL side. Like it's been quite a while now. They've been waiting for them to kind of like finalize a deal here, and it just doesn't really seem like there's like a good spot in Arizona for them to actually like commit to like build a new rink. It's kind of interesting with this Utah like Jazz owner because it was like a couple of months ago it seemed like he was like really interested in bringing a team there. The one thing though is like if he's buying the Coyotes though, like he's not really getting into the expansion process, right? Like
Yeah.
I've heard that he wants a team there so he can expand, but like if he's taking over a team, like it's not going to be an expansion team, right? So I'm kind of curious to see how this all does play out, to be honest. Like the good thing with the Coyotes, like for a potential buyer, is like they are on the up, right? Like in accordance to like their prospect pool, and like they're playing a lot better this year. I know they're probably not going to end up making the playoffs, but I mean, I think they've made some significant improvements to their roster, and even just bringing in like a young guy like Logan Cooley. And honestly, I like them bringing in like Zucker and stuff like that this year. I thought it was really good for them to kind of like start heading in the right direction, considering that they haven't been good for years. I think at this point it would be great though if Utah is able to buy them, because it seems like too like they're just going to end up using like the Jazz like basketball facility, right? So like
Yeah.
that will be a lot less costs than having to build a new arena. Honestly, it's not that I wouldn't be willing to get the Coyotes, or not. I wouldn't be willing to not get like the Arizona a team like in the future again if they do end up moving, but it just doesn't seem like right now is like the time to have them there, to be honest with you. I don't know how
No,
you feel about it, but I'm just kind of like over them being in Arizona at this point.
I completely agree with you. Like, honestly, I do want to see the team stick in Arizona, to be honest, because, like, I think it is a good hockey market. You look at, like, Austin Matthews coming out of Arizona, right? Like, Arizona, like, you look at LA right now and California and how the hockey scene's sort of blowing up there and everything Gretzky did for California hockey. Like, I think Arizona for sure is an untapped market. Like, Biz on Spittin' Chicklets he's a big Arizona guy. Like, he's always talking about Arizona, how untapped of a market it is. And like I think the NHL for sure can succeed there, but it just needs to be set up properly. And like we haven't seen it set up properly at all since the team's been there. Like they need to have a proper facility and a proper location run by the proper people, which like none of that's happened, right? So like if it does happen, I for sure think they can succeed, but with the NHL right now, it's just like they're not seeing any progress towards that. So that's I think where their frustration's coming from right now is that you're just seeing what's going on there and there's no progress. There's no good news coming out of there. So it's like now we need to step in and take the next steps, whether that's like selling the team to Ryan Smith and moving them to Utah, whether that's the NHL actually buying the team back, because I have seen that as like a possibility that the NHL just straight up buys the team back from the current brass of the Arizona Coyotes. The other interesting thing I saw though was the Phoenix Suns. They have a pretty nice arena. Is there a possibility maybe that you sell to them and then you move into that arena because then you do have a nice facility and a good location. Like the Phoenix Suns, super successful, maybe not super successful, but they're a good basketball team right now, right? So it's like, could you sell to their owner? I believe his name is like Matt Ishba. I might be completely butchering that, but could you sell to him and have some success there in Arizona? But for the Utah, like it'd be interesting to see a team in Utah, whether it's buying the Arizona Coyotes, whether it's what would that be, 33 teams now in the NHL? Like I think expansion,
I think there's more teams coming within the next
yeah,
couple
like whatever happens with Arizona, if they move, don't move, get sold, there for sure is going to be expansion coming within the next couple of years. Like I think by 2020, I think by 2026 Olympics, we're going to have 33 teams, to be honest.
Yeah, and I can even see a possibility by even like 2030, like we get that even number in with like a 34th team, to
Yeah.
be honest, or at least like talks about like buying the team, and maybe if they're not exactly in the league yet. Going back to like the Phoenix Suns point, that would be really interesting. The only thing I wonder though is like, I wonder how the league would feel about that, considering like they were already in Phoenix and like they didn't
Yeah.
really seem like they worked out too well there. So I really wonder even if like the Suns owner was willing to do it, if the NHL would kind of just like almost veto it. You know what I mean? Just considering like it didn't really work out for them like earlier in like the 2010 decade. You know what I mean? I would like to see a team in Utah though, and the thing is, which I mean, like, doesn't bother me a lot. It's like, yeah, it's a significant move, but like Utah's also like right beside like where the Coyotes are, like state wise, right? So like they're
Yeah,
not moving all the
it's
way
not too
across the
far.
country. Like the diehard Coyotes fans, I mean, they're not going to be able to go to every game, but at least there's kind of a route for them where they can travel not too far to go see their team play as well. So I think Utah would honestly be a pretty good option. I at this point, like I said, I just think that they should move, and I wouldn't take away the fact of like bringing a team back to Arizona in the future if the cards kind of fall in and it's the right situation. But I think the NHL too, what's bothering them about this whole thing is that the Coyotes are getting better, right? Like they were kind of in the hunt of at least like battling for a playoff spot for some time. Man, they don't want a team with a 5,000 seat arena playing in a
Yeah.
playoffs, dude. And I think that's the one thing that they're trying to push on this process is that, dude, like it would not surprise me if the Coyotes like were pushing and potentially made the playoffs next season. Like I think
Not
they
at
can
all.
definitely
Not at
be
all.
better. Like I think they've just shown a little bit of inconsistency down the stretch here. And personally, I'd say they're kind of out of it at this point. I know mathematically they're not, but they would really have to go on a winning streak. And there's a lot of teams battling for that last spot, right? So it's very hard to jump a lot of teams. But I think that's one thing that's definitely bothering the NHL at this point, seeing that the Coyotes are improving, becoming somewhat of a good team, and they don't want them playing in a 5,000 seat arena in the playoffs, man. It's not enough revenue for the league compared to them even having like a lower echelon team from around the league. Let's even talk about like a team like Columbus or like something like that. Like they would prefer them to make the playoffs when they have a full barn, you know what I mean, compared to like a 5,000 seat like junior college rink.
Yeah, and the whole arena thing too, it just looks sort of embarrassing on the NHL. It's like you look at the other big four sports leagues in North America with the NBA, MLB, NFL, like neither of those three leagues would ever allow a team to do that for like full multiple seasons, right? Like of course you have like the Field of Dream game for baseball, like you have like Mexico series for baseball as well, but like you those leagues are never going to allow that for a team to play in that small of a venue for two full seasons, possibly three, because like if nothing happens next year would be their third full season there, right?
Right.
Um, I think we should move on to a team not too far from Arizona. It's the LA Kings. Man, do they stink as of lately, dude. They've
Yeah.
lost 14 of 17 games heading into the NHL All-Star break. That led to the firing of their head coach, Todd McClellan, last week. Jim Hiller, he's been named the interim head coach. And the big thing with him that he was sort of saying is that he's got to get PLD going. He's got to get him going. The guy signed for $8.5 million a year. He's in year one of his 8-year deal. And like he's just not looked good, man. He only has 10 goals, 10 assists, and 48 games played. Like we all see the potential with PLD, but it's just like some games he looks good, next two games he looks awful. Like the commitment just doesn't seem there for him at like whatsoever. What do you think the Kings have to do sort of to get him going?
I don't know, man, because it's tough because like when he came in, right? Like you were probably expecting him to be at least the 2C for a couple of years behind Kopitar, and then when Kopitar's kind of phasing out, he's at that point where he can be a bona fide 1C, and then you have Danault at 3C, which I think he's like a 2C, right? So it's like a luxury having him
Yeah,
down there. And the thing is with Dubois is his play's been so bad that he's been playing at that 3C role. And the thing is, it's like you'd think that would almost help him because he's getting less hard matchups. You're battling against probably like third, fourth lines on a lot of teams, and you'd think that would help him like get his confidence back and he can start like putting up some points. But like that really hasn't been the case at all. This is a large commitment they've made to him, man. Like right when they
yep.
sign 8.5, I'm like, dude, that's a risky contract. Like, yeah, sure, it can work out. He's had some flashes where he's looked really good in Columbus, a little bit in Winnipeg
Against the
as
Leafs, man,
well.
that in the bubble, dude. Like, oh my God, that guy just killed the Leafs in the bubble, right? It's like
But
you
it's
look at
like, dude,
him.
this is such a large commitment that like you almost have to make it work. You got to try,
Yeah,
dude. Like I don't really think buying him out at the end of the season is an option. Like it's way too early in the contract. They want him here for a long time, but it's like I don't know what he needs at this point. Like 20 points in 48 games, dude. Like what is he even on pace for at this point? Like 35? Like
yeah,
that's
they're about
awful,
that.
dude. Like he should be making like 3-4 million dollars if he's putting up that kind of production. And the thing with Dubois is like at times he's been good in his defensive zone, but he's also lacked that like kind of urgency, man. It's just like I'm kind of happy the Habs didn't go for him because I thought they were going to, and I was kind of on board with it. But what they gave up and the commitment that he had to give 8.5 for 8 years, like I just don't think he's proved that at any point in his career, to be honest, yet. I really hope he turns it around because LA's committed a lot to this guy. Like to be fair, as much as we're ripping on him, like he's not the only problem right now.
Oh no, not at
Their
all. But
team has just been going downhill since that really good start this year. They look like they were going to battle for the division. And now it's like they're like holding on to the wild card by a thread. You know what I mean? Like they lost 8 in a row. The Oilers won 10 in a row. They gained like 18 points on them in the matter of like a couple of weeks. Like you thought there was no way Edmonton was catching them. And I don't know about this point. They could be ahead of them in the standings. You know what I mean? I just am personally like I don't trust Cam Talbot going all the way, man. Look, he started
not at all.
really good this year, and I would say even the first 10, 15 games, you probably could even put him in the Vezina conversation. But after that, he's going downhill, and I don't really trust Riddick as the backup either. Personally, I'm on the page that like Jake Allen would be great there to have kind of two veteran guys going back and forth. None of them are really starters, but then kind of feed off each other. You can throw Riddick in sometimes, but I think LA's definitely got to make a couple moves here. At the end of the day, they're still a very deep team. Like their forward core still looks good. We've talked about this earlier in the year. I think one guy who's kind of phasing out there and there's not really a spot for him anymore is Arthur Kaliev.
Yeah, I
And
could
him
see him
being a
on the
young
move.
guy, he is going to provide value. He hasn't been too good, but he is a former first round pick. So, I mean, if they're trying to bring in a defenseman, even a goaltender, anything along those lines, I think he's probably that odd man out because now it seems like Victor Arvidsson's been out the entire season and it seems like he's been skating and he's coming back soon. So, I think there's going to be one guy there that's going to be out, and I think it's Kaliev or however you pronounce it. Excuse me. They're gonna have to figure it out though. But it seems like these new coaches when they're coming in this year are like almost turning things around pretty fast. And also like DJ Smith just got hired there too as an assistant coach a couple days ago. He's familiar with Jim Hiller as well.
Yeah,
Honestly, I wasn't a big fan of McClellan to be honest. A lot of people like him a lot. I don't know, man. I never thought he really coached that team properly.
I think part of the reason why he got fired was like it seemed like he was sort of unwilling to change his system, right? Like LA gets off to this hot start, they look really good. He like at one point we were talking about him as a potential Jack Adams finalist, right? Like, and a couple months later the guy's fired. But like I think teams sort of just started to figure out LA and they weren't willing to change their system at all. Like when you look at the splits, I have the splits in front of me here. In their first 31 games, 2.42 goals a game. Past 17, 1.41. Like, man, you're not going to be winning games if you're scoring a goal and a half a game. Like you're just not going to win games unless your goalie has a shutout every night. It's not happening. Expected goals for over the past 17, 1.87. Like not good whatsoever. But for me, the biggest thing though is a high danger chance conversion. Start of the year, first 31, 15.1%. Last 17, only 10.5%. Like they're just not getting those chances
They're
right now.
also
They're
like
not converting
averaging
their chances.
three less high danger scoring chances a game, which is a
Yeah,
lot, man. It's not that you're gonna score in every one of them, but it's like if you could score on one of those three, dude, and like you're getting an extra goal every game. You know what I mean? And it's surprising me how not bad they are offensively right now, but it's like they have a deep forward core, dude. Like if you
yeah,
go
really
through
do.
I still think if they can turn it around, they would scare me in the playoffs. Honestly, if they figured it out and they were playing like they were earlier this year. I think the one thing that really helped them earlier in the year though was that 11 game road win streak.
Oh yeah,
Like,
oh yeah, without a
holy man,
doubt.
that they've been awful at home. They've really got to figure that out. Because even being like a hockey team from LA, like that crypto arena is like buzzing a lot. I find, man, like it's a good place to play. Like
Dude, you got
they're
the
gonna have to
celebrities
figure it
there.
out there.
Get Will Ferrell out there with the face paint on, dude. That's one of the best NHL photos ever. But yeah, they got to figure out. Like honestly, they got some games in hand right now, but like they're just sitting in the wild card spot, just sitting in the wild card spot. So like, dude, if they keep this up, man, we could be talking about them like not even making playoffs,
And
which
the
is
thing
like
is,
who
it's
would
their
put
good
this at
start
the end
has
of the
put
year?
them in a good situation,
Yeah,
right? Like
it's helped them out a lot.
they're not 6, 7 points out of a wild card spot. Like I think Blake made the move at the right time, to be honest, before it got really, really ugly. Because it's
Yeah,
like, dude, they're still the season ends today. They're in the playoffs, right? It's just that they've got to figure out their game. Like 14 of 17 is pathetic for a team like them to be losing that much, to be quite honest with you. I think they need a goalie because I think Talbot, it's like his age is almost like catching up to him. Like he can't be a full starting goalie. You know what I mean? And now Copley's out the season. Like I don't really know if I trust Riddick as a backup, like long term. I
no,
know he's been kind of decent in the short term here for the Kings, but I still think they can turn it around, to be quite honest with you. I think a couple moves are coming from Rob Blake.
I
And
could see this team making a splash. Not
do
gonna
you
lie,
think
dude.
they're going to end up making the playoffs?
I think honestly, I could see LA making a splash. Like when you look at LA over the last couple of years, they're not predictable at all. Like at one point
No.
we're talking about LA like oh like they're a rebuilding team. Bam, rebuild's over. Rebuild was over like that, man. It's like Rob Blake so far in his tenure with LA, he's not been afraid to make the risky moves, like bringing in PLD, risky move for sure. Has it paid off so far? Not at all, but he was willing to make it and he was willing to sacrifice like two pretty good players and some picks to get that player in there. And like you look at their prospect pool, like Heliev, not so much of a prospect, but like he's a young player who has some upside, right? Like that's a good trade piece right there. Whether it's going out getting a goalie, whether it's making a splash, like you have Brant Clark. Like Brant Clark, man, if you put Clark out there come trade deadline, dude, like you could bring back like a
I really
really,
wonder if they don't want to do
really good.
that, though, is the thing, right? Like he seems like he's like a really key piece for them. It's just like they have a logjam right side right now,
Yeah,
like with Doughty, Spence, and Roy. So I think that's kind of why they're waiting. Like he's tearing up the AHL right now, though, right? So I wonder if it's more of like a minutes slash like confidence kind of thing, and he's going to get brought up around playoff time. And the risky moves thing, like you talk about last year, dude. Like he fucking said fuck you to Jonathan Quick, dude. Like the guy who's
yep.
been there like his whole career to bring in a goalie at the deadline and Gavrikov, right? So you're right. He's not afraid to make these moves. A lot of people are calling for his job. I kind of disagree with that, to be
No,
honest. I think he's done yeah, this Dubois move has been really shit, but like, dude, he's built this team up, like from them winning the cup to this rebuild, like drafting Byfield and some of these other guys like Brant Clark, you know what I mean? So I don't think that his job should be on the line. I think it was more of a
no,
coaching
yeah,
thing,
not
to
at
be
all.
honest. And I think he did the right thing. But I guess you never know in the higher ups, right? If they end up missing the playoffs, who knows? They
Turcotte,
had pretty high expectations this year.
Turcotte's another guy we didn't mention who's in that prospect pool. Like guys, he's dealt with a fair bit of injuries since his
He's been
draft.
playing a bit though, and he looks decent. So I really wonder what's going to happen even there now. Like
Yeah, I think Rob Blake's done a great job. Like you look at the Ottawa Senators, man, like they've been rebuilding for the past like 10 years almost now.
Yeah.
Like when did they go to that Eastern Conference Finals? 2017, I
That was
believe.
17, yeah. And
Yeah,
18, they
so
started kind of selling everyone during the season.
I guess it's been like 7 years, 6 years of a rebuild where it's like, dude, LA, man, like LA, their rebuild was
Well, they
like a one.
they they more or less like after they won the cups, like still tried to go for it for a couple years, and then they were like, I don't know, we're not really that good. Like we got to take a step back. But like the rebuild was like pretty fast, I would
Oh,
say. Like it was only a
oh
couple
yeah,
seasons.
I'd say it was like 3 seasons max.
Yeah,
Like at one point, we were probably all thinking like Doughty's going to be on the move at some point in his career. Like Kopitar, man, he's like he might not retire in LA King, but like right now it's looking like they are a team. They are a team when they're playing good to watch out for, as you mentioned earlier.
and I think the thing is like they've he's been patient with their players, right? Like
Yeah,
Kempe was never this good until a couple years ago. He was kind of a young prospect in their system. He's been good. Like Iafallo, yeah, he's gone, but he was there since the start. You know what I mean? Like,
Byfield.
yeah, exactly. Like Byfield, everyone's writing him off, man. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Even like Trevor Moore coming in that trade with like Jack Campbell, like they re-signed him last year. Everyone's like, man, this contract's not great. Yeah, he hasn't been great lately, but he had a really good start this year as well. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I like what they're doing overall. I think this is a really rough stretch for them, but they're gonna have to figure it out because like it's more than a rough stretch, dude. Like
yeah.
14 to 17, that's like a last place team like kind of streak. You know what I mean?
Hey, Oilers were like this at the start of the year, man. So look at where they're
Exactly. They
now.
can.
So
LA's talented
anything,
enough. I think they can turn
yeah,
this around.
anything can happen in the NHL. I think it's time we move on and talk about your Montreal Canadiens. They did a little bit of business over the All-Star break. Sean Monahan, he was traded to the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for a first round pick in this year's NHL draft and a conditional third round pick in 2027. Kent Hughes, he did a phenomenal job with this because the Canadians, they also got a 2025 first round pick from the Calgary Flames when the Flames sent Monahan to Montreal, basically just to eat Monahan's contract. So, like, out of Sean Monahan, you guys have gotten 2 first round picks. Good production from the guy. Like, he's a good guy in the locker room to bring up these younger players as well. So it's like, dude, like I praise Kent Hughes for what he's done with this whole Sean Monahan situation. And honestly, like the other thing too is like good for Sean Monahan because at the end of his time in Calgary, man, like he was dealing with a lot of injury problems. Like it was to the point where it was like, man, like is this guy gonna be like one of those guys that retires at like 20 something years old just because he's like giving
The
his all
amount of
to the
injuries
game
he's
and
been through already.
but no, like he goes to Montreal, starts playing better. Like it's been a great story to see with him being a Flames fan. Of course, I'm a little biased here because
Dude, he was a
I watched
great
him. I
flame
watched
for
him play, but
years, man.
oh
Like,
yeah, he was amazing with Gaudreau and Kachuk like on that top line the one year. Like, they were a team to watch out, or that was a line to watch out for. But what do you like about this trade though?
I mean, I wasn't too convinced they'd end up getting a first for him. But after seeing like the Lindholm deal, and obviously he's not Lindholm. Like their production this year has been similar, but seeing Calgary get like Kuzmenko and a first and a good prospect,
Yeah,
I was saying, you know what? I think he's going to get at least a first for this guy. That fourth can become a third if Winnipeg wins the cup this year. I don't really know if that'll end up happening. They're on a little bit of a losing skid right now, but like you said, dude, like we got this guy for free and like we're getting 2 first round picks and a conditional fourth for him. I think the thing with Sean Monahan this year is like he's been through all these injuries and like kind of what's been his like the negative part of his game for years has been kind of his skating. Like his skating's like looking like pretty good this year. And I
well,
think
dude,
that's what
his
really helped him a lot.
I think at one point he went through like 2 hip surgeries in the span of like 16 months or something like
And
that.
that's really hard to come back from,
Yeah,
right? I think he's kind of worked really hard behind the scenes to get himself to this point. When he was traded, I know he had like 35 points in 49 games. Like that, you're on pace for 50 to 55 points. That's pretty solid production, I think. Winnipeg, like they're kind of flip flopping, like Velarde playing C right wing. So it's like the good thing with Monahan is he's pretty versatile, right? Like you can have him in the top six playing center, but dude, I think he could be a really effective third and at worst even fourth line center if he's put in that
yeah.
role for a couple games. I think Winnipeg fans are really going to like him. He's pretty defensively responsible as well.
He's a
He's
pretty
been good
gritty
on the
player too, which I
good on the
like.
power play for Montreal this year, and I think Winnipeg not having Scheifele recently, that's really hurt them a lot. I wonder how it's going to end up turning out for Winnipeg. I think it's really just going to matter how long of a playoff run they end up going on. But I think he fits in there quite nicely. I really thought that him getting traded, that was going to be a team that was going to be on the radar for him. I was also thinking like the New York Rangers could be involved. I know they were kind of interested in Lindholm as well. I think it was a very good time to trade him, though. I was kind of happy they didn't wait to the deadline just because of his injury history. Like, if he goes down in one of these games, like, dude, like, and even if he's healthy by the deadline again, it's like you might not get a first for him. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I really think it was the right time to move him. I know Ken Hughes kind of implied that when he re-signed, they were gonna kind of see where the team was at the deadline, and if they were kind of out of the playoffs, that he'd be willing to move Monahan, and he would kind of talk to him about like where he'd want to go and stuff like that. Because man, even last year, like yeah, he was injured a bit with the Canadiens, but he had some pretty solid production. I really liked him when he was healthy. Like 17 points in 25 games isn't too bad either, right? So you know, honestly, like it sucks to see him go a little bit because I've really liked him in Montreal, but I mean. For the team and asset management wise, this is 100% the right move to make. Getting another first round pick that I'm not too convinced the Canadians are going to keep. I think they're going to kind of do what they've been doing the last couple of years, like bringing in Doc with that pick, New Hook with that pick. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up moving it for a player, but that's also good asset management, right? You turn
Yeah.
a rental player into a potential young player that's probably in this like core range, you know what I mean? 23 to 25 years old. So honestly, like A+ move for the Montreal Canadiens, especially getting the guy for free. And I'm curious to see what they end up doing with this pick later on.
Yeah, the other interesting thing I've seen with the first round picks, I was listening to this last night. I forget where, but they were mentioning that a lot of the scouts think there's a pretty decent drop off after that like 20 range in the first round this year. So it's like a lot of those teams that are going to be in the playoffs and plan on going on a little bit of a runs, like they don't really care about losing their first round pick because I bet like their scouts probably imagine too, like there's a pretty decent fall off in the prospect pool after that 20 range. So it's like if we're picking anywhere from like 25 to 32 or like mid 20s to 32, like who cares? Because we're not getting one of those like not top end guys, but one of those like middle to top end, right?
I think the thing with this draft too is like you kind of look at like the top 15 and you can kind of put it whatever order you want, but it's like
Yeah.
after that, it's a very, I've seen so many mocks where it's like, there's guys you think are going in the first round in there in the second round, and there's like second rounders in the first round. So it's like, I think it's just a very big kind of drop off after 15, and it's very like you don't know who's going to go where. So I kind of agree with that sense, and that's why I wouldn't really mind Montreal like moving on from that pick and not actually using it and potentially bring in like a young player.
Yeah, I think we should move on to the trade deadline preview now. Keep on going with the trade talks. I'm enjoying it so far.
It's heating up
Trade
though, man. I think there's going to be a lot more moves coming soon.
oh without a doubt. Like Lindholm, Monahan, all within the span of like 3 4 days. Like there's gonna be teams trying to make moves here early on. Get those players into your team and have them for more games so you can really build that chemistry with the rest of the lineup. Like I expect to see some deals coming here. I think we should start off though here with sort of our top 5 players, talent wise, that we could see getting dealt with the trade deadline. When I say top 5 players, I don't think either of us were being like, oh, these players are for sure getting moved. So we're going to talk about some of those players later on. These are just the top 5 players that rumors have been out there for. So do you want to? How about you start off with your number one?
So the way I kind of did this was just like you said, top 5 guys that potentially like are more rumored to be moved, but not in the sense that like my number one is the number one guy to be moved. I think
Yeah,
talent wise, the way he's playing this year, I think like the top guy of still available right now is probably Markstrom. The way he's been playing, I think he's been super solid for the Flames this year. Obviously, a little bit of a rough year last year, but even look the year before that, he was really good, right, in the Vezina conversation. I think a team like New Jersey is going to be pushing hard for this guy. I think New Jersey probably thinks they're a goalie away from like being in the playoffs right
yeah,
now. Vanacek's sitting think the league worst in goals saved above average, and he's just
Jack
not been
Hughes just
consistent at
returned.
all. He's not been consistent at all whatsoever. And look, they're a couple points out, but I mean, you got a good goalie in there. Jack Hughes is coming back. You go on a little bit of winning streak. You're in the playoffs, and you're hot when you're going into the playoffs, right? And the thing that's more intriguing to me is like I didn't know if he'd be willing to move in Markstrom. He's got a no move clause, but it seems like if the situation's going to be right for him, that he'd be willing to go. Um, I'll go through the rest of my list here too. Number two,
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure if he'll be moved, but I really like Jacob Chikrin with Ottawa. I
Yep.
think he's
I
on a
like him
really good
too.
contract right now, and it's not expiring at the end of this year either. I think a lot of teams could be interested in him if he is available for Ottawa. I don't know if he actually is, though. There's been kind of rumors about it, but Ottawa's been pretty quiet for the most part about what they want to do exactly. Besides, I know they want to bring in some vets. I don't know if that means moving out Chikrin or maybe that's a separate deal. Number three on the list, I got Noah Hannafin. Obviously, it's a little bit up in the air with is he coming back? Is he not coming back? I don't really know yet. He's a very talented defenseman, though. I think a lot of teams would be interested if he is available at the deadline this year. Number four is Trevor Zegras. He hasn't been playing too well this year. Obviously, still really young, super talented. Don't mind that contract at all under $6 million. It doesn't seem like their GM really likes him as the type of player. Montreal's been rumored for him. If the price is right, I wouldn't really mind bringing him in, to be quite honest with you, even if it is giving up that Winnipeg first. I think it's definitely worth to bring him in for that.
Yeah.
And probably more assets going back Anaheim's way as well. I'd say last year he'd probably be number two on this list, but I think the way his play's been this year kind of just dropped him down to number four. Number five for me is Chris Tanev. There's three Calgary Flames on this list. I really like Chris Tanev. He's not going to do a lot offensively for you, but he's kind of that gritty defensive defenseman. He's always been good defensively. Older now, big leader on the team. There's a lot of teams interested in him. Really curious to see where he'll end up going. But as of right now, for top five players in accordance to just talent, that's who I think is like available at this year's deadline.
Yeah, we have a lot of the same players on the list, a lot of similar rankings. For me, I went with Trevor Zegras at one. I agree with you. Maybe based off his play so far this year, he shouldn't be at that one spot. But for me, it's just the potential that he brings in a trade, like in a trade. Like if Trevor Zegras gets traded, it's going to be a massive deal that we're talking about, right? Like it's going to be multiple first round picks. Like there's going to be some prospects in there, man. Like I really like Trevor Zegras as a player. I think he has a lot of upside, and I don't think Anaheim wants him. Like they bring in Cutter Gauthier. They got a lot of depth at that center position now, man. Like right now when you look
McTavish and Carlson too. Like
McTavish, Carlson, Gauthier, like honestly, dude, Trevor Zegras, like he could be their fourth line C. On like they'll move one of those guys to the wings if that was ever to happen. But like there's just so much depth there. I think Trevor Zegras is going to be that odd man out. As you mentioned, Pat Verbeek, don't really think he's the biggest fan of Trevor Zegras. I saw something the other day where it looked like the contract negotiations over this past summer were pretty ugly for both sides. So I, I could see him on the move. He's my number one spot. For 2, 3, we both go Jacob Chychrun, then Noah Hannafin. As you mentioned, these guys are both some younger defensemen. Both still have some upside. They're on some pretty decent deals right now, but they're going to be free agents within the next couple of years here. Noah Hannafin, he's a UFA this year. Chychrun next year. I really like both these players. Out of those two guys, I think Noah Hannafin, without a doubt, is the most likely to get moved. Like Chychrun, you haven't heard much about him out of Ottawa, but as I mentioned with Zegras in Anaheim, I think Chychrun's going to be that odd man out for the Ottawa Senators on their defensive core. For Noah Hannafin, we're going to hear a lot more here over the next couple of days. I saw something that the Calgary Flames were expecting a decision on if he'll be willing to resign sort of shortly after the All-Star break. And as we're recording right now, it's Saturday after the All-Star break. So like that decision should be coming in here like any hour, to be honest. Um, at 4, I go Jacob Markstrom. I have him down there at 4 just because he's an older player and he still has 2 years remaining on his deal. So it's like, who knows what that regression is going to be over the next. I guess he only has a year and a half remaining on his deal. Pardon me.
And the
But
thing about Markstrom is like it's not that he's not worth it, but $6 million is a lot to like move around and
yeah,
having
it
to
is.
like get that money sent back if like it's like New Jersey trying to handle their cap situation. So like I do understand what you mean in that sense.
But yeah, I have him down at 4. I still think he's a very good goalie and could do a lot for a playoff team. But it's just how much regression is going to be there. These younger teams like New Jersey, yeah, they might be interested in him now, but like he's not the long-term fit, right? And then at 5, I have Vlad Tarasenko. He's on his way out of Ottawa. Honestly, this might have been a complete fuck up on my part to have Tarasenko here at 5, but
I don't really
whatever.
think so, dude. I don't think his production's been the same the past couple of years, but he's still an effective player,
Yeah.
right? Like even he helped the Rangers a lot last year, I thought, kind of down the stretch. Kind of wondering where he's going to end up going, to be honest with you. They can retain half, dude, and the team could get him for 2.5 million. That's pretty solid price tag for Tarasenko, I think, for like a nice like second line winger.
Yeah, and he has a no trade clause too, so he can control
Kind
for
of
a bit
control
here.
where he's going.
Yeah. Um, I think we did a good job there with our top 5 players that we think could get dealt here at the trade deadline. Let's talk about the top 5 like most likely players we have now, because like out of all the players we mentioned, honestly, the only ones I like for sure think are going to be on the move are Tarasenko and Hannafin. And you mentioned Tanev as well, so I guess out of out of the 10 players we had some similar. There's like 3 players that I think are for sure on the move. A lot of the other ones are just like rumors, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. So I'll let you start off here again with your top 5 most likely players on the move.
Yeah, sounds good. I have a couple guys that we talked about for like the other group that we were just talking about there. For number one, I think just because the amount of interest he is on the right side is Chris Tanev. I don't
Yeah.
really see a situation where he's not being moved at this year's deadline, to be quite honest. I think the amount of interest Calgary's probably getting, like 10 teams talking to him, Craig Conroy can get that price up a little bit more and even start like a little bit of a bidding war, regardless if that is the Leafs going for him, Vancouver, Dallas. There's a bunch of teams that I think could use like a right-handed defenseman in the top 4 there, and just like that more defensive style, right? That a lot of teams don't have. Number 2, I have Adam Henrique with Anaheim. I think he's been a pretty solid player over the past couple of years with the Ducks. I just think the Ducks situation right now, with them not making the playoffs, him being on the last year of his contract, I think a team could use him. He's had some playoff success in the past with the Devils. I'm not quite sure who might go for him. I kind of thinking maybe the Rangers now, with them
I could
losing
see
out on
that.
Lindholm and Monahan. He's got a hefty price tag at 5.835, but I mean, if you're retaining that, you're getting him for what, like 2.4 or whatever that would be. Sorry,
It's a
that'd be a little bit
very
more. It'd be more like
nicely.
2.8 or 2.9, but that's still not too bad of a price tag. And even if you can kind of swindle a third team in there, you might be able to get him for like $1.5 million. So I kind of like Adam Henrique as like a third line center on a cup team, to be honest with you. Number 3 for me, I think is Jake Allen. I think with Montreal re-signing Montembeault and him playing kind of the majority of the games, it seems like they're going to keep him. And Caden Primo hasn't played a lot, but I think he's been pretty solid when he's played. And I think Allen has just had a little bit of playoff success in the past. I know he's more of your typical 1B at this point in the career, but I think there's some teams that could definitely benefit from him as like that 1B. LA is a team we talked about. I think Colorado is just playing Georgiev way too much. I think he'd be a really solid backup goalie there. He's making just under $4 million, but Montreal, they do have one more retention spot left. So a team getting him for 1.9, that's a lot less of a price tag, and I think a pretty solid backup goalie. Number 4 on my list is Sean Walker with Philly. There's been a lot of interest in this guy. He's been playing really well this year. I know Tampa's been interested. Edmonton's been interested. I think Vancouver is as well. He's played like a top 4D this year, but I wouldn't say he's like more of a bona fide one. I know they really like him in Philly, but I now think bringing in Jamie Drysdale on the right side long term, it kind of takes the spot away from him because they also got Ristolainen as well. And Philly, like you retain half of that salary. I always look at that part, right? Like if you have a retention spot, like the cap is so valuable, right? So him
Yeah.
making 2.65, if a team's getting him for 1.3, like dude, if he goes to Tampa for 1.3, like that's a team, they're up to the cap, right? Like they want to get guys as cheap as possible. They bring in Tanner Jeannot. What does he make? Under $1 million. Years pass. Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, those guys were making peanuts compared to what they were actually worth, right? So I always look at that retention spot and these better teams that don't have the cap space if they're willing to bring in a guy like that. And I think Sean Walker's definitely worth that 1.3 million, and I think he's definitely going to end up being moved. And then number 5 on my list, I think it's more just the uncertainty whether he's staying or going is Hannafin. I think if it was more he's 100% going, he'd probably be up a couple spots on this list. But I do see him going at the end of the day. I think if he was going to stay, he would have signed by now. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion, to be honest
No,
with
I
you.
agree with you there.
And I think that he's like a bona fide top four defenseman, can even play on the top pair somewhat. So those are my five guys, at least as of right now. There's still some other guys out there that I think could potentially be moved. We kind of talked about it with the other list, but I think those are I would be surprised if one of these five guys weren't moved to the deadline. I'd be quite surprised.
Yeah, the only one I wouldn't be like, the only one I wouldn't be shocked about is Hannafin, just because like, who knows what the fuck's going on with there, man. Like the Flames like aren't going to re-sign him, and then they're
You can't
talking,
lose them
and
for
then
nothing, though,
and
man.
then you're
Like,
not talking, and then now apparently they are talking again. It's like man, like you've heard everything from here to the moon about that whole Noah Hannafin contract negotiation. For my top five though, yeah, it's pretty similar to yours. I have a couple, I think two players here on my list that you didn't mention. Chris Tanev, he's my number one. I think he's probably the best shutdown right shot defenseman on the market right now.
absolutely.
He's a veteran. He's The thing with him though is like the Flames got to be careful here, man, because like Chris Tanev, the way he plays, that guy could get injured. They're playing right now as we're recording. That guy could have just gotten injured right now, blocking a shot with his like head. Who knows, man?
It's interesting, though,
Like
because he's
the
been
way he
like,
goes in the corners.
yeah.
Good,
The thing
go
is with
ahead.
him is like there's been a couple times recently where he's like kind of gone down the tunnel and went back, and
Yeah,
everyone's talking about that. But dude, he hasn't really missed a lot of games over the past couple
no,
of years if you look at it. So there's been kind of this narrative about them trading him before he gets hurt. But the thing is, you're right. He plays that style where you could easily get hurt.
yeah,
And it's kind of I'm a little bit shocked that he hasn't been hurt more over these past couple of years,
yeah, and he's
just
getting a
because of
bit
the way he
older now
plays.
too. But honestly, I think that guy, part of the reason why he doesn't miss that many games is he probably plays through a lot of injuries where there's some other guys that maybe you're sitting down for that, right? Like if Trevor Zegras has an injury and Chris Tanev has that like same injury, I feel like there's Chris Tanev would try playing through it where like Ducks are like, no fucking way you're playing
So
through
I,
this,
I,
right? To
I want to ask you
Zegras.
this as a Flames fan. So would you prefer Conroy right now to kind of like look at the best offer available and take it because of the risk of injury and kind of do like what the Hughes did with Monahan? Or would you right now it's February 10th, the deadline's March 8th. Like, do you want them to hold on to him and kind of start a bidding war at this point?
No, I wouldn't start a bidding war with him because the thing with him is he's a bit older and like I think he is the best right hand shot defenseman that's a shutdown guy right now that can play like in your bottom pairing or be like a 4 or 5 guy, right? But like there's better guys that are going to come on the market potentially, right? So it's like if you start a bidding war that could come back to bite you in the wahoo because like if somebody else comes on the market, like Chris Tanev might not be in big demand anymore. And the other thing too is like when you look at the Flames deals that they've done so far this season, like Lindholm, there was no retention there, right? Nikita Zadorov, no retention there. The Flames, they get three, as we mentioned, teams get 3 retention slots every season, right? So it's like you would have thought that Elias Lindholm probably would have been one of those players that you're retaining salary on to get
I think
a
it was
better
just
pick, a
because the
better
Kuzmenko
prospect.
salary was going back, dude. I think they said we're
That's
not
fair.
doing it with that, you know?
But it's like Chris Tanev, like I think you'd have to retain salary on there. Because like Chris
Well,
Tanev and Noah
that's
Hanifin,
only just going to drive the price up too,
yeah,
right? Like,
Chris Tanev and Noah Hanifin, like those two guys, they're pending free agents. You can retain salary on there. If Markstrom gets dealt, like you're not retaining salary with the time he has left on his contract, right? So
no.
it's like I don't know if the Flames owners are gonna even allow Craig Conroy to go out and retain salary on this Chris Tanev deal. So I'd honestly take the best deal that's available now. And the other thing is like teams have been throwing around their first round picks. It's like you like
Take
Chris
the
Tanev,
risk with it, you know?
like Chris Tanev, if he goes to like Sergachev, he's out right now after that terrible injury the other night for Tampa. It's like Tampa's gonna be looking for a defenseman. Do you think they'd throw their first round pick at Chris Tanev? I think absolutely they would, dude. The way they've thrown around their first round
The
pick the
thing is
last few
that's
years.
different between Tampa and what you're getting from other teams is Tampa
Yeah,
doesn't have their first this year or
that's
next
fair.
year. So you're looking at a 2026 first. So it's more or less, do they want to wait a couple years to potentially use this pick compared to other teams, right?
Yeah.
Because the Hagel deal, that's one of the first this year, and then next year it was the one they got for Jeannot. So I do get what you mean though in that sense. I think he would fit perfectly on a team like Dallas. I think they lack like
Yeah,
one top 4D. Harley has stepped in there and been nice for them. But I
he's
would
more of
really
an
like to see
offensive
him
guy
in
though.
Dallas. And going back to what you said about like if someone else becomes available, one guy I think is potentially available, but they're not shopping, and he plays a similar style, but he's not as good as David Savard.
Yeah,
Like he plays the exact same style. I don't think he's as effective as Chris Tanev, but dude, that guy becomes available. Like I don't know. Maybe your asking price for Tanev for a lot of teams goes down, considering Savard makes $1 million less too, and he's also under contract for one more year, right? If a team wants that instead of a rental. So I do get what you mean. I would look to move Tanev honestly within this next week.
yeah, I would be doing the same as you there, buddy. Let's move on to number two on my list. I got Jake Allen, your goaltender, Jake Allen. Montreal, they're carrying three goaltenders right now. Like I don't know why. Jake Allen, he's probably the best goalie right now in the market. Like if you want to say
Minus
Markstrom's,
Markstrom, but he's not 100% available.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think Allen is like I don't know if Markstrom's 100% on the market where like Jake Allen, I'd be shocked if he didn't get dealt this trade deadline. As we mentioned, like LA, they need a goaltender. There's going to be other playoff teams here that want some depth at their goaltending position. Like even Dallas, man, like Wedgwood, he's been phenomenal this year. But like, could we
Otter's been
see
kind of
them?
injured.
Yeah, like could we see them picking up a goalie? Like you look at Vegas last year, man. Like having three goalies going into the playoffs never gonna hurt you. Never gonna hurt you.
That's what just surprises me that Colorado's ran so long with Georgiev and
Yeah.
like an AHL goalie almost that's like developing, you know what I mean? Like I just think like yeah, you keep Georgiev as a starter, but you could throw Allen in like 40% of your games for the rest of the year and like give Georgiev some rest. Like you know what I mean? Like I
And if
think that would
Georgiev
be
goes down, if
really
Georgiev goes
nice.
down in the playoffs or right before the playoffs, like you're fucked. You're
And
fucked
he's a
going
good
into the
veteran goalie,
playoffs.
right? Like I don't think he ever lived up to the hype that he was supposed to be, Jake Allen, but I mean, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's a really solid like 1B. Like, you know what I mean? And teams need
Yeah.
that.
So number three on my list, I have Adam Henrique, Anaheim Ducks. Um, you have him on your list at number two, as we both mentioned. He's on that last year of his deal. Anaheim, they're not in a position to keep him and re-sign him, to be honest. They got a lot of young depth at that center position, as we've mentioned earlier on in this podcast. The thing with him is he has a 10-team no trade list. I don't think that's going to take effect whatsoever. Like if he's played on Anaheim long enough, like if they're trading him to a team that's contending, like I don't know
I doubt he'd have like a
why
really
he would
good
yeah.
team not on his list too, right? Like I wouldn't guess that like if they were trying to trade him to the Rangers that he would have that team on his list, to be honest with you.
The other thing with him too is like Cutter Gauthier, pardon me. He's coming up as soon as he's done in college, right? Like he's coming up and playing his games at the end of the year. So like
Yeah.
you got to move on from an Adam Henrique just to have that roster spot open for Cutter Gauthier. Number four on my list. I'm honestly a bit surprised you didn't have him on your list. I got Anthony Duclair. He's on the third year of his deal. He's a pending UFA again. His AAV is only 3 million. So it's like you could get this guy if San Jose is willing to retain. You could get him for 1.5 million for like he's a good depth scorer, man. Like a
Guy who went
lot
to the Stanley Cup Finals last year too.
yeah,
Like
like a lot of teams are going to be looking for depth scoring going into the playoffs. He's a guy that's going to provide that. San Jose, they
speedy.
like I don't know why you'd keep him at all because he doesn't
Unless he
fit
was
your
willing to
timeline
commit like
whatsoever.
decently long term,
But
then
even then, like he doesn't fit in your timeline. It's like you like
yeah,
you could get it. Like I don't think you're getting a first round pick for Duclair, but it's like you could get like a
probably a
second or a
second or like
third.
a third
Yeah,
and a prospect or something along those lines.
I think
Yeah, no,
he's
that's definitely a guy that there hasn't been a lot of chatter about him though, which is kind of surprising.
yeah.
Like about him actually being moved and teams interested in stuff. So I really wonder where teams are standing with him, right? But you get him for $1.5 million, dude. Like,
As
fuck, man, he's on your
a
fourth
third
line
line
even.
guy,
Like,
fourth line,
it's
yeah.
it's worth it, right?
And then yeah, the fifth guy on my list, I've Vlad Tarasenko. Without a doubt, this guy's on the move. The only thing I've heard, like Kevin at the office was saying, apparently Tarasenko like loves it in Ottawa. He like loves it there. So it's like the only way Tarasenko doesn't move is if he like uses his no trade clause, which like the way Kevin's talking about Vlad Tarasenko, like it sounds like the guy like loves Ottawa so much. Like there is a possibility that he's straight up like, no,
Wants to
like
resign almost.
I wanna stay. Yeah. So it's like unless that happens. But like if you're Vlad Tarasenko, like I'd continue to try winning cups. I don't think it's gonna happen in Ottawa. It's clearly not happening in Ottawa this year, but I don't think it's happening in Ottawa in the next couple of years really at all. So
But
it's like,
even like, why doesn't if
why
that's
not
the
move
case,
on?
why doesn't he just waive his no trade, go to a contender, and then go back?
Yeah, that's
If he
fair.
really likes it that much, you know what I mean? At least get the shot of like going for another like a cup this year, you know?
Yeah, the only thing I can say with him is that like he already has a cup, so it's like who knows where he is mentally. Where it's like I already have my cup at this point. I just want to
Wants to
prioritize
settle
like
down almost,
my
yeah.
family and like my well being and my post career life, right? Because like he's getting to the point where he's going to be retiring within the next like couple couple seasons, I'd
I
think
don't know how
maybe.
old he is. I think he's like 34, isn't he? So
He's 34. He's had some injury issues. Like I could see him retiring here within the next. Like I don't think he's unless he just does 1 year deals. Like I don't think he's going to be signing a a second contract after this season in the NHL.
yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
Overall, though, honestly, this trade deadline, there's some big names as we mentioned earlier on in this segment. There's like a lot of players even that are like pretty likely to be moved that are some pretty top players around the NHL. I'm really pumped up for this trade deadline. I think you're gonna be back for trade deadline, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just going on vacation for next week and then I'll be back. Be
Yeah,
back
so
the day after family day.
we'll definitely be talking about trade deadline going forward here and post trade deadline. We're gonna be talking about a lot. Maybe we'll have to do something here for trade deadline when that day actually comes. See what it is. Maybe it's a little live stream. We'll see what happens though. Overall, though, I think it's been a good podcast. Honestly, it's gone by quick, but like still a decent amount of time. Like we haven't talked about PWHL so far. It's like if we talk about the PWHL, that's another 15 minutes probably we talking today, right?
Yeah. No, I thought it was a good episode. We kind of covered a decent amount of topics and just kind of, at least at this point, like talking about guys that are available, right? There's two like decent, I'd say at least they were in the top 5 to 7 on like the trade bait boards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of getting moved in Lindholm and Monahan. So curious to see if there's going to be any other names kind of popping in here that teams are willing to move on from. Um, but I guess time will only tell. And I think it's going to be interesting with a couple of these guys. Like there's going to be more trades for the deadline, right? But sometimes it goes stale closer to the day. But I think guys like potentially like the Habs don't have to trade Jake Allen right now. Like Calgary doesn't have to trade Markstrom. So it's like they might hold on to these guys as long as possible.
Yeah.
And you might see a really big move at the deadline. And even Zegras, like, yeah, he might get moved, but it might not be a mid-season thing, right? So,
Yeah, that could be a draft day thing.
but it could be a deadline thing too, right? So I think just the hype of that, knowing that there's some guys that could be moved, could not be moved, is going to make the deadline a little bit more exciting this year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun. We're getting to that point in the season where it's really starting to ramp up. We're getting to the important time of the season. Honestly, even the weather's getting nicer, man. And overall, the mood's just feeling good. You're gonna be fucking living next week down in Costa Rica, buddy. I'm jealous of you.
Pretty pumped.
We're gonna have Josh on the podcast next week finally, I think. So it's gonna be an interesting episode next week. So stay tuned for that. But for everybody that listened this episode, have a good one. Thanks for tuning in.